my name is Brenda Miller from Among Brenda's Quilts and Bags, and also my video class site makebagswithbrenda.com. And today I want to offer you a little Christmas gift, and it is a free class on how to make the Christmas gift tote. And here are a couple of examples for you. As you can see, we've got a bottle of wine in this one. It's also great for nuts, for candies, for a sleeve of cookies, just a nice little Christmas gift. So let's get started on your free project so you can have a very Merry Christmas. So in order to make your Christmas gift tote, we're providing you with some written directions, and this includes all the material and notions and so on that you're going to need to make your little bag. But I'll just go over everything with you so that you're clear on what that is. You're going to need 3 fat quarters. I picked up a little fat quarter pack with 6 in it so I can make 2 bags. This is Scotty Dog Christmas by the Craft Cotton Company from the UK. And of course it's got little Scotty dogs on it. We need 2 buttons for our handle, and these are on my shopping site. I've got some pearl cotton. You can also use embroidery floss, and we're going to use that around the cuff to do a little bit of big stitching. You'll need a removable marking tool because, you know, once you mark it, you don't want the marks to be permanent. So this is a friction marker, and it irons off when you pass an iron over it, so that's nice. You need an embroidery needle for your embroidery floss, some small scissors to clip the curves of our circular bottom, and some scissors to cut out your cuff piece for your bag. We've also got some special materials inside. I'm using Pellon's Decor Bond, and it is a fusible stabilizer, although I think of it more as an interfacing, a medium weight interfacing, so it's fusible on one side. And we're also using Pellon's Thermolam Fusible Plus, and it is a fusible fleece that is fusible on one side. So that's everything you're going to need. Let's get to it. So let's fuse our Pellon Decor Bond to the outer bag and lining. So place it on top, matching the edges, and I'm going to use a hot iron and steam to press this for about 13 seconds. I've got my outer bag with its interfacing on the back, and I have also done that with my lining. And just to note, the lining is somewhat smaller than the outer bag. Don't let that confuse you. That's so that the lining actually fits in the outer bag without being all rumpled up. Next, we're going to work on our cuff. Maybe we'll put our Thermolam down first, and our cuff on top. And this is pretty much the same procedure where you use a steam iron on it and fuse it in place. There you go. And you've still got another cuff piece here without anything fused onto it. Now we're going to sew along the 14-inch long side of the outer bag. So to do that, you're just going to put it right sides together along the 14-inch side. Alright, so that's the outer bag. Now we're going to take the inner bag and we're going to sew it along the 13 3/4 inch side. Okay, there we go. Now next we have to press our seam, and you know, it's a big tube, so how are you going to do that? I use a tailor's clapper. It's just a wooden piece. It was used by tailors in the past to kind of flatten seams by hammering them. Very low tech, but it fits into these little tight spaces. Of course, you probably don't have one, although you could buy one from me on my website. You can use just an ordinary tin can inside. So I'm going to open my seam. Here's my inner bag, and this interfacing, this Decor Bond, is actually going to hold the bag up so that it stays nice and round and firm and doesn't, you know, fall in on itself. It's easy to work with, easy to sew through. Okay, so there are our 2 pieces, our lining our inner bag and our outer bag. All right, now we have to put some marks on the bottom of the outer bag. So I'm looking inside to see which way the heads of my Scotty dogs are facing, and they're going this way, so this is the base. And I'm gonna fold along the area from the seam allowance and mark at the crease. And then I'm gonna fold the marked area and the seam allowance together and mark at either end, just to mark it into quarter sections. Okay, so that's all marked into even quarter sections, and then set that aside. And I've got my base, the outer bag base, which is again the Scotty dogs. And we've got some decor bond for that as well, which we're going to fuse in place. Okay, so I'm going to fold it in half. And, let's see what I'm doing here or not. Mark the halfway point, and then I'm going to, match those 2 points up and find the quarter points. All right, now we have to fit this round piece onto this, basically we'll call it a square piece. So, how are you gonna make that easier on yourself? Here's what you do. Get some snippy little scissors, and you're gonna make small cuts, not quite 1/4 of an inch because we don't want them to exceed the depth of your seam. This will help your fabric kind of conform to the curve. Now I can take my base, my circular base, and match those marks we made and pin it. So I'll pin it in the 4 marked areas first. Okay, so that is what it looks like now, and from this point you just kind of curve your piece on the outside and fit it into place. So there's our prickly little piece with all the pins. We're going to sew around, just easing everything in place. Okay, and I'm just over stitching where I began. Alrighty, so we've gone all the way around. Now you'll notice I sewed over my pins. Be careful when you do that. That's all put in, and I'm just going to turn that to the right side. You can hear how stiff it is, right? So you know it's going to stand up. Hand in there. And there's really no way we can press that, so we're just going to open it like that. Now if you didn't do the clipping, you'll want to do that clipping of the seam before you turn it right side out. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the lining fabric. We're going to mark it into quarters. And we don't have any decor bond on the lining base. Don't really need it, so we're not going to put it in. And quarter this up. And I'm just going to show you the alternative method of doing this without clipping around the base of the outer bag and matching the marks. Kind of working that in, pinching it a little as I go. Okay, so that's actually fitting quite nice without the clipping. This is the trickiest part of the bag, and once you're through this, it's a breeze. Whereas before I actually sewed with the lining side up, this time I'm going to sew with the base side up, so you can just, kind of see it'll work both ways. Okay, we're right back to where we started. I would have used white thread here normally, but of course I want you to see what's happening. I'm going to just pop it in here, and I don't really have to match up the seam lines, but you can. And pin the top edges together. Okay, just a few pins around there, and then I'm going to baste around just to hold everything in place. So I'll just set my machine for its longest length, there, and I get a 1/4 of an inch when this edge is against the fabric. So I'm going to move in a little bit, and I'm just sewing inside of the tube. So we've got 2 pieces here, one has the thermolam on it and one doesn't, and you're going to just put it right sides together on this short edge, pin it, and sew a 1/4 of an inch seam. So I'm going to use my little clapper again, or you can use your tin can or whatever you've got, and press that seam open. So now we have these 2 cuff pieces, and we want to put them right sides together, matching the seams. So we just slide one into the other. Get my pins. And I'm just matching my seams. I'm going to pin it at the top at the seam and at the bottom at the seam. And then I'm going to pin around the wavy edge. Alright, so I pinned all the way around that, and we're just going to sew a wavy line. And using my 1/4 inch foot again, trusty 1/4 inch foot, I just slowly follow the curve. When you do get to your seam line, you have pressed it open, but just make sure everything is actually staying open. Otherwise it gets awfully bulky through there. Okay. There we go. All sewn up. Ready for our next step. Alright, now we're going to turn the cuff so it's wrong sides together, and you could clip this a little bit to help it turn. Well, let's just do that in the insy areas, and just fold one side over the other. Hopefully my plaid matches. Looks reasonably good. Okay. Back in on itself. I'm going to pin it. So I'll pin the seam edges together, the seam line, and all the way around. I'll go to the opposite side next and kind of give it a little tug so I know it's, even. Okay. Now I'm going to take this back to my sewing machine, and I'm going to finish the edge of this with a zigzag stitch. Alright, so I've got a straight stitch foot on. I need to put a foot on that will allow for zigzag, so it's got a wider hole. So I take my foot off, this zigzag foot on, change my stitch, and I don't want too wide a zigzag because I only have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, so I don't want a really, crazy wild zigzag. Right now it's at 3.5 millimeters width and 1.4 millimeters length. That's just fine. Okay, so I'm zigzagging. You have to be careful that you don't catch the other side as you're sewing. So be aware of that. Okay. There we go. Aha. Beautiful. Okay, I'm just going to flip it over and see how my plaid matches up on this side. That's better, so I would like that to be the outside of my cuff. There. Okay. Because this is a fairly heavy thread, I can't put a knot on it and sink it into the fabric very easily. It's just not going to want to go through the weave. So I'm going to poke my needle in a little ways away from where I want to start and just leave a tail end underneath the fabric. It's not going to have any stress put on it. See, I'm just pulling it through a little bit there, and there it's gone. Okay, so you're just doing a running stitch here actually, and I'm going to follow the 1/4 inch seam line. This is a fairly heavy fabric, so I should actually have a thimble on my finger to help me get through it. But I don't, so I won't. Okay, and if your stitches are about a 1/4 inch apart and a 1/4 inch long, they're going to show up. Otherwise, on this particular fabric, you wouldn't even see them. So that's why we're stitching big. We want it to show up. It has a nice nostalgic, crafty, fun look about it. And it's easy. So I can kind of feel where the seam is underneath here, and that's what I'm following. Alright, so I have made my big stitches all the way around there, my little running stitches, and I'm just going to give it another press. Right, now we got another thing to fit onto this bag, and we're talking round to round now, but again we have to mark in quarters like we did before. Okay, so I'm folding at the seam line here on the cuff. And I'm marking, hopefully I can see that, and then folding that mark to the seam line and marking into quarters. Okay, same at the top of the bag. Okay, almost there, girls. Or we might have some men too. Okay, now we're ready to attach the cuff to the bag, and what we want to do is put what we consider to be the right side of the cuff. So one side might look a little better with the stitching or the matching, in my case, of the seam line. We want that right side to be facing the lining because it's going to turn over and show on the other side. And you want to match your seam allowances and your marks. Alright, and then it's back to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we've got that all stitched on, and we're going to press it. And I'm going to press the seam down. And we want to fold this down. Got some little straggler threads there I'm just going to nip off. There are little tubular kind of tailor hands you can use as well, and they're pretty good, but I like the firmness of the wood myself. It's quite a firm surface, unlike an ironing board, which is way too smooshy. Smooshy is not your friend when you're pressing. Okay. Now, I just need something here to push into the bag to get rid of the little... There. Okay. There we go, that's coming along very nicely. Now it's time to make our little carrying strap for our bag. Alright, we've got that piece of decor bond, and we have our strap. So what you're going to do is fold your strap together on the length with the wrong sides together and press it. And then you're going to press the long edges to the fold line you just made. Don't burn your fingers. And same on the other side, press it to the center. going to open it up. We have kind of that channel in the middle. And I'm going to take my decor bond and put it in the middle and press it in place. So now I'm just bringing those edges back towards the middle as much as they will go. Okay. Then we're going to fold the center line again. We want to have finished edges all around the strap, and the best way to do that is to take your strap, which you've got all pressed together, and turn it back on itself so that the right outside bits are together. And line up those outer folded edges. Pin that. Do the same thing on the other side. Pin that. And then we're going to stitch right across the short ends using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And stitch across. Back stitch. I'll back stitch at both ends. And I'll just put the other end through right after the first here. Those two apart there, okay? Now, when you turn this to the right side, it's finished on the ends. I'm just going to use this little purple thing, it's called, to poke out the corner. Turn the other side over. Poke out the corner. Alright. So now what we need to do, usually I'll clip those threads at this point, is turn this onto itself. Pin it together, and then we're going to edge stitch around the entire strap, and I will just sew in place to finish that and start around. Now you can see I have this side of my foot is 1/8 of an inch, this side of my foot is 1/4 of an inch, so that's what I'm using to guide me around the edges and keep a nice even edge stitch. Our cuff's all done and our strap's all done, but we have to, of course, add one to the other. Now we want our strap to be centered on the sides. So here's the back seam, and I want to find the sides, the side middle point. So I'm going to have to do that folding thing again. Or I'm marking the front, and then I'm marking the sides. Should just be at that sort of apex of the curve. Hope that's the right word. Okay, so now I have 2 marks that mark the side of the bag. We're going to take a ruler and mark 1 3/4 inches from the ends of the strap, and also 1 1/2 inches from the end of the strap. Both of these marks are on the same side. 1 3/4, 1 1/2. Okay. All right. Go back to our bag and locate those marks we just made. Oh, there's one. Okay, so let me mark this a little bit more so you can see it better. You're going to take your strap and you're going to center it along one of the side marks, and you're going to make sure that the 1 3/4 inch line is at the edge of the bag. So first of all, make sure it's in the center of that mark. Okay, and then I'm going to pin it. Then we're going to go over to the other side, and there is my mark right there. And I'm going to take my 1 3/4 inch line and line it up to the top edge and center the strap over the mark. And just have a look at that and make sure it appears to be correct. Looks right, because there's our center curve, and that all appears to be a-okay. Now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to stitch along the 1 1/2 inch line. Put an extra pin in here, and the reason for that is because if you don't put an extra pin in, here's what can happen. And you know, you don't want your handle on crooked. So now I've got to sew along here, and this is a little bit fiddly. You have to kind of jam cram everything under there. All right. And it's bulky, so, you know, sew slowly. This is what's going to actually hold the strap in place, so it needs to be strong because you might have a bottle of wine in here. Okay. Take our pins out. All right. Now we're going to add our buttons to that. I think the bigger buttons look really nice here. Kind of funky, almost like little earmuffs. The button lines up to the top of the stitching line so that if the stitching line is unsightly, it hides it. So isn't that clever? We want to hide anything we don't like. And we're going to use our embroidery floss or pearl cotton again. And I'm going to tie a knot to the end of this thread here, and I want to show you how that's done. So you could just tie a knot, but here's another technique. You take your needle and you place the end of the needle at the eye, or the end of the floss at the eye, and you hold it down with your thumb and you wind the floss around 2 or 3 times, and then you hold it and you pull the needle through. When you pull it through, it feeds that wrapped area to the base of your floss and leaves a nice little knot. And just clipped off the tail end. And I'm going to now sew my button in place. So I've lined it up. What I could do is kind of poke a hole here so I can see where my first stitch has to go. Went right through the buttonhole. I'm aiming for that hole. Okay, now I'll go through my 2-hole button. And the idea is to cover that stitching line. Now we're going to go through the other side. Again, you could use a thimble here because this is getting a little heavy. And that knot is holding everything nicely inside, so we'll just go in at the knot at the back and come up through the top. And you're going to stitch through this 3 or 4 times. I think will do the job. Just what you want is your floss to show up because it's pretty. Another thing you could do is leave the ends on the outside and tie a little knot and bow there. That would be cute too. The buttons really make this bag cute. So find yourself some nice buttons. And we do have some nice buttons on our website, nice big buttons. All right. Now, it's time to christen our bag with a bottle of wine. Little bow sticking out there. And there we go. All done. So you can, obviously put wine or sparkling juice or something in there. You could add a sleeve of candies or nuts. You could even weight this and put some silk flower arrangement kind of things in there for a Christmas vase look. The sky's the limit, so have fun and Merry Christmas to you from Brenda Miller at AmongBrendasQuilts.com and MakeBagsWithBrenda.com, my video site.